So interesting premise, Pankaj. You of course keep the hard question for me, right? Okay, so let's maybe unpack that a little bit. When someone can't develop that infrastructure and someone else sees an opportunity, they'll step in. It's an open market system, it's a competitive market, etc., etc. At least that's what we aspire for in most parts of the world today. What we've had in the Asia Pacific at large, but particularly in South Asia, if you look at the statistics, more than half the population is still online. So this, as I said, let me just unpack that a little bit so that I can answer your question better. The problem is that if you have half the population offline, it also has a direct relationship to what infrastructure exists. But it's not just about running cable or setting up satellite links or whatever else it may be. I think you also have to take into account that this South Asia in particular is a very tough terrain to work in. You've got the tallest mountains, for example. You've got some of the most powerful rivers and valleys, and it goes on, and jungles. And having worked in infrastructure for quite a while, in fact, most of my career in some way or form, most of the time, deploying infrastructure becomes a political problem, not necessarily an economic or financial or technology problem. The technology is actually the easy bit. To connect two cities, one of the biggest problems we've ever had in past work that I've done, a simple thing called right of way. No, you can't dig there, you can't use that, right? And it just becomes so complicated. So as I said, let me unpack a little bits here and there. But I don't want to get into the weeds. Perhaps in the breaks we can have if someone wants to talk about that. The question about the new colonial powers on the internet, and I think it goes to what I was just alluding to before, that what we have is there's a space or vacuum that exists that some entity can step into. Now, government might not have the priorities or the economic or financial capacity to work in that space, so private sector steps in. Now, private sector should be held to account. And by the way, I should say one thing missing on this panel is the private sector. Maybe that's something we may want to look at in future. So that perspective is also very important, right? But the question then becomes, if someone else, a private sector, I'll give you another example. Most of the submarine cables being deployed around the world right now are not being done by governments or the old telecom companies. They're being done by the new age digital companies, right? In fact, Google and Meta are probably the largest cable owners in the world now. When I was in the telecoms world in the 1990s, so my background is telecom and power engineering. When I was working in that field, there was no concept of a content provider would actually be running cable and owning cable and selling services on that cable to telecom companies. It used to be the other way around. So the dynamics have completely changed, right? But it also is about money. It's also about having access to those resources to build those systems.
Investments.
Yeah. And where does the money come from?